Homage to Buddha Shakyamuni, homage to Manjushri, homage to all the lineage masters. Profound and subtle dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we can follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate all sentient beings, please generate unsurpassed bodhicitta. Now let's continue with the Guhyagarbha Tantra. Next we've come to the section on the path of liberation through prajna. Yesterday we talked about the path of certainty through method. Today we'll focus on the path of liberation through prajna. Just as the root Tantra states, through the union of hearing, contemplation, and meditation on the mandala of perfect wisdom, everything is spontaneously present and self-originating. This teaching is primarily about the mandala of wisdom, where the ground, path, and fruition are all perfectly complete, achieved by engaging equally in hearing, contemplation, and meditation. The first line refers to the ground tantra, the second to the path tantra, and the third to the fruition tantra. It describes how we naturally achieve the meaning of self-originating wisdom. In other words, by means of hearing, contemplation, and meditation, you'll come to recognize the nature of our mind and the nature of all phenomena. This is thus as taught primarily through the means of the exceptional prajnas of hearing, contemplation, and meditation, to determine phenomena to be primordially awakened as self-originating wisdom, the spontaneously perfected mandala, and to meditate upon this allow the path to be traversed. That's the main point here. Of course, this doesn't mean the path of methods is unnecessary. From time to time, we still need to rely on the practices of the path of methods. But here, primarily, you first study the Tantras under a qualified Vajra master. Through this, you understand that all phenomena are primordially pure. Then you contemplate that meaning, and after contemplating, you practice it over and over. Now, what do we determine through the wisdom of hearing, contemplation, and meditation? Everything in this world, within both samsara and nirvana, is actually and always has been the self-originating wisdom, the spontaneously perfected mandala. Regarding the great mandala, we will discuss it later when we reach the section on mandalas. In essence, a mandala refers to the natural state. It's the mandala of the nature. The Guhyagarbha mandala on the mountain at Larungar is what we call an illustrative mandala. It represents the 42 peaceful deities described in the liberation through hearing. But the true mandala is the nature of the mind, the very essence of all phenomena. Once you've determined this through study and reflection, and to meditate upon this, allow the path to be traversed. Self-appearances are liberated within the mandala of the great evenness of kayas and wisdom. Through practice, the 5 paths are perfected, and eventually everything is liberated into the primordially pure great mandala of the self-apparent, 3 kayas and 5 wisdoms. This type of practice is called the path of liberation through prajna. For the vast majority of people engaging in your own study, reflection, and meditation, to realize the true essence of the Tantras is a path that is completely safe and free from any risks. Now, for many practitioners, even though progress might feel a bit slower, this path is free from any hidden dangers. But look at the path of methods we discussed earlier. If you truly have the karmic connection and all the conditions are perfectly aligned, then it is indeed incredibly fast. It really is. However, if you lack those specific methods and try to force the practice of skillful means, it can actually become a hindrance to your progress. It's quite risky. That's why most people find it better to follow the path of liberation through prajna. It resembles the gradual transformation of stone into gold when placed in close proximity to the ketubah jewel. It takes a little longer. It doesn't happen in just an instant. Yesterday's method was like turning iron into gold in a single moment. Remember the makshika we mentioned yesterday? It transforms iron into gold immediately. This path is different. Think of the ketubah. When a stone is placed near it, it gradually turns that stone into gold. In the same way, through steady and gradual practice, you will definitely reach the authentic result. Here there are 2 paths. The path of the instantaneous realizer with keen faculties, who enters with simultaneous realization and familiarity. Within the path of liberation, there are 2 types, the instantaneous and the gradual. For these keen practitioners, while they are studying, reflecting, and meditating, their practice and their realization of the view happen at the exact same time. It's like what we discussed before in the ascertainment of the 3 types of vows. Take King Indrabhuti of India, for example. The moment the Buddha gave him the pith instructions and empowerment, he instantly attained the state of the Tathagata Vajradhara. His awakening and practice happened all at once. He didn't need any gradual training. This kind of realization is even faster than some of the methods on the path of methods. Compared to the instantaneous realizer we mentioned earlier, you could say the one on the path of liberation is even quicker. That's how it is. This is the path for the instantaneous realizer. Second, the path of the gradual developer, who initially determines the view and then needs to train to achieve skill in samadhi harmonious with the view. Think about many of the great masters. In the beginning, they had already received empowerment and guidance from a perfectly qualified guru. When they first awaken, right at that initial stage, even if they have recognized the nature of mind, they still have to keep training without stop. It's just like many people today who have recognized the nature of Dzogchen. Omniscient Jigme Lingpa described a beginner's glimpse of Dzogchen as being like seeing the sun through a brief break in the clouds. It's very easy for it to be obscured again by the dark clouds of wandering thoughts. If you don't keep up the practice, you're like a child on a battlefield. You can't even tell who is your friend or your foe. So even if you awaken initially, you still need to train for a period of time. Only then will your realization become stable. This is what we call the gradual path. Samadhi that focuses on the general idea of meditation but is not yet fully developed is called meditation based on devotion. For instance, you might be meditating on precious human rebirth, impermanence. You are going through the preliminary practices one by one, but you haven't really hit the full standard for any of them. You keep practicing the difficulty of finding a human rebirth, but you don't quite reach the mark. Then it's time to move on to impermanence. You think about impermanence for a bit and do some meditation, but that hasn't reached the mark either. Then you move on to the suffering of samsara, refuge, bodhicitta. In each case, you have a certain level of faith and confidence in your heart. This is called meditation based on devotion. We have this in Secret Mantra too. In this kind of meditation based on devotion, you might not have perfected every detail to the highest level, but this practice still counts for a lot. This provides the potential for the mind to develop the authentic path while temporarily possessing qualities that accomplish various activities. This kind of practice actually brings immense merit and benefit. Take what we discussed earlier, great emptiness and agical compassion, along with the single mudra, elaborate mudra, the accomplishment gathering of group formations, the 5 approaches of the generation stage. Even if you haven't mastered each step, you are still practicing with these visualizations. In your heart, you try to visualize emptiness for the sake of all beings. You think about how all these beings haven't realized this state yet, and you feel they are so pitiful. In this case, you are basically meditating on each stage through its general image. Does this have any merit? It certainly does. What kind of merit? By practicing like this, it empowers your mind to give birth to the authentic path. That is its virtue. Furthermore, because the methods and liturgies of the secret mantra involve inconceivable visualizations, you can accomplish various activities. So, for those of you who might be worrying, it's just like how we practice the preliminaries. I feel like I've practiced a little bit of everything, but I haven't really mastered any of them yet. Is there any merit? Is it even okay to practice like this? The answer is yes. You can definitely practice this way. This is called meditation based on devotion. There is another way called the path of definitive perfection. In the path of definitive perfection, you've actually hit the full measure of every single stage. Meditation that brings the 5 yogas, such as great emptiness combined with the stages of death, bardo, and birth. As we've already discussed, as long as you're wandering through the 3 realms of samsara, you can't ever escape these 3 states of existence. The 3 states of existence here span the entire cycle from birth to death. First is death, which refers to the actual moment of dying and the bardo of dying. Then the intermediate state, which is the bardo state between lives. And then rebirth, the whole period from being born until the first signs of death appear. Each of these is tackled individually. First, you use the yoga of great emptiness to clear away the habitual tendencies of death. Second, the yoga of agical compassion cuts through the tendencies of the intermediate state. Third, the single mudra, elaborate mudras, and the accomplishment gathering of group formations cut through the tendencies of rebirth. meditation that brings the 5 yogas to gradual maturity is called the path of definitive perfection. The 4 states of Vidyadharahood are actualized in dependence upon the path of definitive perfection. If you've truly hit the full measure of all 5 yogas, then that is the path of definitive perfection. It's just like some people are very thorough in every practice. When they meditate on the difficulty of finding a human rebirth, that realization truly takes root in their mind. When they meditate on impermanence, they reach the full standard for that as well. When they move on to the uncommon preliminaries, they master every single one. Take refuge, for example, every state of mind required for it, and every single criteria has been fully met. This kind of practice is what we call the path of definitive perfection. Once you've perfected this, you will definitely attain the fruition of the 4 states of Vidyadhara. In this way, one who possesses prajna will, through hearing and contemplation, initially realize the authentic view according to the meaning of great purity and evenness. So, for someone with this kind of wisdom, through hearing, contemplation, and meditation, they've truly gained authentic and firm certainty in what great purity and evenness really means. By relying upon the yogas of evenness and post-evenness, in which one trains in samadhi harmonious with that view, all ordinary confused concepts will be liberated as a matter of course. The view comes first, and then you practice based on the view you've settled on. You've got to get clear on the view first, that all phenomena are primordially pure and equal in their emptiness. You've got to gain that firm certainty. That's the mark of a real view. Once you have that view, you won't drift away from it in your practice. It's not like your view is heading one way while your practice goes another. Your practice should perfectly match that view. Whether you're in the session or in between sessions, you keep training in this yoga. As you train like this and as you move further along the path, all your clinging, whether it's to pure or impure things, and every bit of that stain will slowly fade away. And all your ordinary deluded thoughts will naturally be self-liberated. That's the method of the path of liberation we just mentioned. Recognizing that all things are equal and pure through study and reflection, this is actually vital for anyone practicing Dzogchen or Mahamudra. Once you have that view, anything you do, visualizing the deity, reciting mantras, or sitting in meditation, it'll all be great. Because with a solid view, you won't be easily swayed. Without the view, your practice is like a building made of ice. When spring arrives, it'll just go crash and fall down. Why? Some people don't care about the view at all at the start. They just want the highest trekcho, the primordial purity. What is trekcho? It's primordial purity. But have you finished your Ngondro? No. They'll say, my guru told me I have the perfect capacity for Dzogchen. So I ask them, what exactly have you practiced? And they'll say, oh, my guru was so kind, he gave me special instructions. I've been practicing trekche. So they keep on with it, and eventually I'll ask, what does trekche actually mean? It means breakthrough, they say. Then how do you practice it? You just rest your mind and visualize bindus. Now, on the surface, the things they're told are definitely sublime, but it's hard to say if they're truly instantaneous realizers. I mean, why are you visualizing purity like that? Why primordial purity? Why are you looking at bindus appearing in the sky? Honestly, it's no different from Qigong or other worldly methods. They also have you visualize this or that. Even in cartoons nowadays, they can make all sorts of rainbows or special effects appear. That's not necessarily a unique practice of secret mantra. The real point here is that when you follow a path that's in sync with the authentic view and you practice accordingly, all those ordinary deluded thoughts will be cleared away. Our current winds, channels, and bindus are mostly just temporary deluded thoughts. But by using them as skillful means in practice, the mind is eventually purified. When the conceptual mind is liberated, it is inevitable that the movement of the wind element inseparably engaged with that will also be liberated in the space of wisdom. This is very important. As you all know, according to Mahayoga, we primarily practice through the generation stage. In Anuyoga, the approach is to work with the winds, channels, and bindus as a way to recognize the nature of the mind. To put it simply, the relationship between wind and mind is like this. Wind essentially means movement. Our mind is constantly restless because it's riding on these inner winds. If you can bring these winds to a halt, the mind will naturally settle into stillness. And In that stillness, you gradually come to recognize the mind's true nature. That is the specific method used in Anu Yoga. However, in Dzogchen, we take a different path. If you directly realize that the mind itself is primordially self-liberated, then the winds and bindus, which are inseparable from the mind, will naturally be liberated along with it. This is why, in the practice of Dzogchen, there's no need to visualize bindus or go through the generation stage. Why? Because the moment you recognize the nature of the mind, the underlying wind that was causing the mind to wander naturally vanishes. As for those external supports, the channels and bindus, the instant we fully recognize this mind, all those other factors simply dissolve into the Dharmadhatu. It's just a natural law. But if you haven't realized the mind directly, you have to use winds, channels, and bindus to reach that nature. So whether it's the path of liberation or the path of methods, realizing the mind is without a doubt the ultimate goal. I might have been a bit blunt yesterday, but when it comes to certain so-called yogis who claim to practice consort practice in secret mantra, honestly, for most of them, spiritual realization isn't their true aim at all. It's much more likely that in their own minds they're still driven by ordinary lust and mundane clinging thoughts. They probably haven't given a single thought to purity and evenness or recognizing the nature of the mind. Instead, they take bits of what they've heard about secret mantra to justify their ordinary worldly behavior. If that counts as secret mantra behavior, then every single being in the three realms could be considered a top-level secret mantra yogi. So, I really think people need to understand the ultimate purpose of the generation and completion stages. It's to liberate the very essence of your own mind, to reach that state where primordial luminosity and emptiness are inseparable. In the approach of Ati-yoga, you recognize the mind's nature in this very moment. This realization unties the knots of the channels and causes all the winds and bindus to dissolve and vanish on their own. This is a direct and complete way to practice. For those with the highest capacity, this path works. It's true that secret mantra has many methods involving winds, channels, and bindus, but what is their ultimate purpose? It's to fully strip away the layers and reveal the mind's essence. That is the sole objective, and it follows a natural law. Once confused, dualistic appearances along with all contributing circumstances have been the genuine truth of the fundamental nature becomes manifest, and one is led to the resultant state of no further learning. This means letting all those deluded thoughts of subject and object, as well as all external conditions like winds and bindus, and all physical actions and movements, eventually settle into natural peace. Once you've recognized the essence of the mind, any other activity is just extra effort. It's not really necessary. For someone who has the true capacity for Dzogchen, nothing else is required. You just rest, relying on the Guru's pith instructions. We will also discuss this over the next few days in the Manjushri Great Perfection. It teaches you how to rest in the nature of mind through the 4 ways of resting. The first is the view as unshakable as Mount Meru. When you are held by this view, even a few short words of instruction can resolve everything for you. You won't need any other complex practices or intense efforts anymore. None of that is necessary. In that state, subject, object, and even your karmic winds all dissolve and liberate on their own, revealing the ultimate truth. When your practice reaches its full maturity, you finally attain Buddhahood, the state of no more learning. The 2 paths of method and liberation are also defined in terms of how they emphasize either method or prajna. One path is centered on methods, with wisdom playing a supporting role. The other is centered on wisdom, with methods as the secondary focus. They are simply categorized based on which of these 2 takes the lead. It must not be construed that one is absent from the other. For example, in the path of methods, the study and meditation of the path of wisdom is not entirely unnecessary. That is not what it means. Within the path of wisdom through study and meditation, all those skillful means such as the pith instructions for the upper and lower gateways mentioned above are not entirely unneeded either. That is not the case at all. It's just a matter of which part you focus on more. But you have to realize, when it comes to seeing the truth, they are exactly the same. Whether it is the path of mythos or the path of liberation, as long as you truly realize as the ultimate truth of purity and evenness and recognize the mind's true nature, the final destination is exactly the same. only the way to get there is different. They are just different paths reaching the very same goal. This point has already been explained. So far, we've covered the principles of the path of wisdom and the path of liberation. Then we discussed their relationships and differences. Next, the text explains the accomplishment gathering. When it comes to practicing the accomplishment gathering, generally speaking, this is a very advanced collective practice in secret mantra. Even symbolic, illustrative wisdom can arise in the minds of practitioners depending on their practice. Symbolic illustrative wisdom refers to analogy wisdom, which is a stage within the path of application. It is the wisdom that arises just before one reaches the path of seeing. When performing this yogic joint practice, it is essentially like a great feast offering with an equal number of male and female practitioners. There are certain uncommon, specialized methods involved. This kind of practice is similar to a great shock offering. Generally, this takes place at the end of the path of accumulation. In the past, among the assemblies of Vidyadharas in India, there were specifically these kinds of joint assembly practices. Through this practice, some gained the analogy wisdom of the path of application. Others achieved the level of a desire realm or form realm Vidyadhara. On the surface, they look just like ordinary people in the desire or form realms, but in reality, they have already attained the same realization as the desire or form realm gods. Their bodies become completely radiant and transparent. In the past, some great masters could fly through the sky. Even under moonlight, their bodies cast no shadow. When touched, their bodies were completely transparent and unobstructed. These are the fruits of attaining the desire or form realm Vidyadhara levels. At the very least, they will gain different levels of achievement. This is because practicing the secret mantra brings immense merit. Since this is connected to the exceptional accomplishment resulting from the profound methods of mantra, it is basically impossible not to achieve some kind of result. Everyone will reach a certain level of realization. If the accomplishment gathering of the path of definitive perfection is authentic, once supreme siddhi is achieved, the entire group formation will depart for the ground of the Vidyadharas. It's also mentioned in the Nyingma school of Tibetan Buddhism. And there was a king named Indrabhuti who, through this accomplishment gathering, reached the pure land of Udayana along with all his retinues. Udayana, the land of Dakinis, was a city near India back then. Since all these people had left for the pure land, the entire place became empty. This really happened. The king and his entire retinue achieved the Vidyadhara accomplishment together. This occurs because the 10 signs such as smoke and the rest are perfected when the samadhi of great emptiness is accurately engaged. This is because his earlier practices, the 5 yogas like great emptiness and magical compassion, were each practiced to completion. He was a practitioner of the path of definitive perfection. He mastered every stage, fully perfecting all 5 yogas. As a result, the 10 signs, starting with the vision of smoke, will naturally manifest. Regarding these 10 signs, at first you might see rainbows or shimmering mirages. Eventually you fully attain the divine eye and the knowledge of others' minds. You truly come face to face with the deity. These 10 signs are described in great detail in the Kalachakra Tantra. All 10 signs are fully perfected. A practitioner who has accomplished the generation stage of phenomenal existence arising as the ground will invoke the clear light of the 4 states of emptiness that arise as a matter of course during evenness in the kaya of the deity of mere wind mind. This refers to the clear light of the 4 emptinesses mentioned in the Manjushri Great Perfection. So, in that state of meditative absorption, one's subtle wind and mind actually transform into the deity's form. Actually, before reaching the path of seeing, the forms of deities or gurus that practitioners see are mostly manifested through the blessing of purified winds and channels. If your daily practice is going well and your winds and channels are clear, you will even dream of the deities and the guru at night. But if your wind, channels, and essences are out of balance, you will have nightmares every night and feel miserable when you wake up. It all comes down to whether your wind and mind are purified or not. In this state, one frequently sees the deity as the subtle wind mind. When the potency of the limitless appearances of all-pervasive purity reaches perfection in post-evenness, For someone practicing this path of definitive perfection, it's common to have visions of the deity in their meditation, or even find themselves travel to pure lands. They might go to the copper-colored mountain to receive teachings from Guru Rinpoche, or visit the Pure Land of Bliss to hear Amitabha Buddha speak. These states often manifest directly within their meditative absorption. Then, upon arising from meditation, the entire physical environment appears as Sukhavati, the celestial palace, and various pure lands. They no longer look at people and think, he's a bad guy, he's a jerk or whatever. It's not like they see a world of total villains where no one is decent. They don't get triggered and feel angry at everyone they see. It's not like that at all. In their eyes, all sentient beings are an assembly of Vidyadharas. Everyone appears in the form of male and female bodhisattvas as pure deities. This vision of total purity is perfected in the post-meditation state. Therefore, during the great accomplishment gathering and in reliance upon the consort, the truth of the genuine nature of phenomena will be immediate. Because of this, there is the 4 branches of approach and accomplishment. When these 4 branches are perfected, there is the final accomplishment gathering. When this accomplishment gathering is fully realized by relying on an action mudra, a wisdom mudra, or a mudra of emptiness form, true liberation can be achieved. At that point, one basically reaches the level of the first bhumi. When you reach the peak of the path of preparation through these practices, these skillful means can lead you to the first bhumi, or even higher. In fact, many Vidyadharas reach their realization exactly through such means. Next, we'll talk about the manner of progressing on the path. Third is the manner of progressing on the path. Here, the characteristic of the path to be traversed is that it leads one to the unsurpassed destination, the result of liberation. In our context, whether it's the path of liberation or methods, the generation stage or the completion stage, all of these are the path. But what does the path actually mean? The essence or nature of the path is the supreme bridge that carries us to the unsurpassed destination, the result of liberation. If we want to reach the state of supreme Buddhahood, we need this peerless ladder or bridge to get us there. That is the meaning of the path. If distinctions are made, there are unsurpassed mantra designates 5 paths. This is the same as in the Sutrayana. In the Sutrayana, there are the paths of accumulation and preparation, followed by the paths of seeing, meditation, and no more learning, the 5 paths. It's the same in the Mantrayana. There are the paths of accumulation and preparation, along with the paths of seeing, meditation, and no more learning. How the path is traversed. So with all these different paths, how do we actually go about practicing them? What is the process? Just like in the Sutrayana, the practitioner who possessed supreme great compassion and wished to achieve the state of Buddhahood in this lifetime in order to liberate limitless sentient beings. When you first start on the path, you really need to have bodhicitta. What kind of bodhicitta should that be? We all know the standard definition, wanting to save every single sentient being, that is bodhicitta. But here in the Mantrayana, this bodhicitta is a little different. As the Manjushri Great Perfection explains in the Sutrayana approach, you aspire to save beings after practicing for countless eons, but waiting that long, enduring 3 great kalpas, is incredibly difficult. That's why we aim to achieve Buddhahood in this very life. This path of attaining enlightenment in one lifetime is found in the Great Perfection. It is the supreme great compassion and wish to achieve the state of Buddhahood in this lifetime. In this context, great compassion actually refers to bodhicitta. I remember a fellow countryman of mine once said, bodhicitta is basically what you get when your great compassion has grown up. He had a point. Bodhicitta is indeed the fully developed form of great compassion. Perhaps the bodhicitta mentioned here is still in its growing stage. Still, anyone who possesses this kind of great compassion can be said to have bodhicitta, the intent to achieve Buddhahood in this very life to save all beings. This bodhicitta is indispensable for any practitioner of the Mantrayana. It seems some people, once they start practicing the Mantrayana, tend to forget that renunciation is the fundamental requirement in the Hinayana, and bodhicitta is the essential entry point for the Mahayana. Bodhicitta is absolutely mandatory in the Mantrayana as well. The difference is the urgency. It's the resolve to save beings in this very lifetime, not after some distant number of years. So there is a difference in the power of that aspiration. Such an individual will know that the path through which the ultimate result is achieved depends solely upon the Vajra vehicle. If you want a definitive way to actually achieve the state of Buddhahood, relying solely on the Sutrayana paths will take a very long time. Only in the unsurpassed great perfection of the Vajrayana can you find such direct, skillful means. Therefore, through receiving the four empowerments from a fully qualified guru, one's mind is brought to maturity. Without empowerment, you haven't officially entered the Vajrayana. Many people are extremely focused on receiving empowerments. It's right to be concerned, because to even enter the door of Vajrayana, you are not permitted to engage in most practices without an empowerment. But is receiving the empowerment enough? Not at all. The real key is to diligently practice the view, meditation, conduct, and fruit, and to uphold your samaya. These are what truly matter. But what do we actually see many Vajrayana practitioners doing these days? Oh, there's a guru over there. I must go get an empowerment. They just rush off. But after the empowerment, the guru might not explain the samayas, and the practitioners themselves don't ask either. They treat it like taking a bath. Once they're washed, they think that's the end of it. But what are you supposed to do after the empowerment? It's like cooking. Once the food is ready, you have to eat it. You can't just leave it sitting there. The empowerment has matured your mind stream, but once it's matured, you must continue to practice the path. That is the most fundamental part. So the way many people behave these days is indeed quite a peculiar thing to see. After the four empowerments well mature the continuum, consequently, the vows of the general and specific samaya are guarded and maintained according to their meaning. In the Vajrayana, general samayas include the common vows from the Sutrayana, such as the pratimoksha precepts, lay vows, and the principle of avoiding all evil and practicing all good. All of these, along with all the bodhisattva vows in the Mahayana, are grouped together as general samayas. These common vows of Sutra and Tantra must be guarded. Then there are specific samayas, such as the 5 vows in the magical manifestation matrix that we'll cover later. And those profound specific samayas link to the hidden meanings of the specific practices you are doing. You must protect all of these very carefully. Through accurate training on the path of the 2 stages consistent with the correct view of the great purity and evenness of phenomenal existence, the 5 paths will be gradually perfected. See how important this sentence is. First, receive empowerment. I am quite happy this time, mainly because in the past, many people didn't really understand the Vajrayana, even some who have lived here at Larungar for years. I used to be a bit hesitant. I didn't dare to teach it too freely. But this time I decided that for anyone who has been here for a long time, I should explain these things. Otherwise, you won't even know the basic theory. It would be a shame if you've stayed at the academy for so long, claiming to have studied Vajrayana at Larungar for years, only to find you can't even answer a simple question about it. It just doesn't make sense. And besides, you really need these principles for your practice. So, look at the sequence here. First, receive empowerment from the guru. Second, protect the samayas of that empowerment. And what is the absolute foundation? The foundation is the right view, realizing that all phenomena in samsara and nirvana are by nature great purity and great equality. With this as your base, you can then practice the generation and completion stages as they are meant to be. Only in this way can the 5 paths be fully perfected. If you just get an empowerment but don't keep the vows, don't establish the right view, and don't practice the 2 stages, can you still perfect the 5 paths of secret mantra? Absolutely not. So the proper order is everything. I really hope everyone here takes these words to heart. You know, these kinds of pith instructions, I can't keep repeating them over and over. I was thinking about my past lectures on the Abhidharma Kosha. In a lifetime, I might only teach a text once, and that might be the last time. But if someone truly wants to learn, they can at least get a preliminary understanding from those recordings. I used to have quite an interest in the Abhidharma Kosha myself. Maybe I don't have a pleasant voice. Honestly, whenever I hear my own recordings, I want to turn them off immediately because I think they sound terrible. But as for the content, I think I did a decent job. It's the same with these principles of secret mantra. I'll explain them once, and it's up to you whether you can take them in. For those with sharp faculties or a strong karmic connection, one time is enough to realize, oh, so secret mantra isn't just about getting an empowerment. It requires the right view, the practice, and most importantly, keeping the samayas. These few points are the Vajra speech of Mipham Rinpoche. If you can remember them for the rest of your life, then I think your journey to Tibet has truly been worthwhile. Next, let's talk about no matter which path you practice, the 37 factors of enlightenment are absolutely essential. This is true for both the Hinayana and Mahayana, and it's no different in the secret mantra. The 37 factors of enlightenment are like a great highway to liberation. I believe this same metaphor is used in other scriptures as well. First, within these 37 factors, let's look at the four mindfulness. The Sutra of Right Mindfulness discusses this, and the Wisdom chapter of Bodhicharyavatara also focuses on explaining these four mindfulnesses from the Sutrayana perspective. So what exactly are these four mindfulnesses? A Thai Dharma teacher once told me, our main practice is the four mindfulness. Do you have these in your secret mantra tradition? I said, oh, definitely. We certainly have the four mindfulnesses in Secret Mantra. In fact, ours might be a bit more profound. He might not have liked hearing that, but if he won't take my word for it, we can just look at the facts and see. Initially, meditation upon the bodies of both oneself and others as the primordially pure nature of the mandala, in combination with the great evenness of unelaborate emptiness, comprises the close placement of mindfulness upon the body. Take the Hinayana approach, for example. You probably know how they practice the four mindfulnesses. In places like Thailand and Sri Lanka, a lot of the practices involve meditating on the body as something impure and impermanent. That's what they call the mindfulness of the body. Then, if we look at the Mahayana approach, you analyze the entire body from head to toe. After analysis, you realize it is all emptiness, free from elaborations. Not even a single atom truly exists. Everything is determined to be empty. This is the Mahayana way of practicing mindfulness of the body. Now the Vajrayana builds upon both of these, beyond the Hinayana view of impurity and impermanence and the Mahayana view of emptiness. It goes further to recognize the true nature of the body. It realizes that the body is actually inseparable from great purity and great evenness. You visualize the bodies of yourself and all others as a mandala of primordial purity. And in truth, its nature is primordially pure. If it weren't, how could you visualize yourself as Manjushri if the inherent nature of the body were actually impure, like the Hinayana says, as if it were a vase filled with filth, and you then tried to merge Manjushri into yourself? There would be a massive contradiction. If the body were fundamentally impure, visualizing Manjushri within that vase of filth would never result in purity, no matter how hard you tried. Doesn't Mipham Rinpoche mention this in the Beacon of Certainty? Therefore, we see that our body is a primordially pure mandala, inseparable from emptiness that is free from elaborations. That's how we practice this meditation. This specific way of practicing is our mindfulness of the body. So when you compare it to the Hinayana and the Mahayana within the Sutrayana, the Vajrayana's way of practice is actually more advanced. Transformation of whatever feelings arise into the wisdom of exaltation is the dose placement of mindfulness upon feeling. In other traditions, feelings are analyzed as being purely painful or empty. That's how the Mahayana, Sutrayana, and Hinayana define it. But here we take it a step further. All thoughts and feelings are, in their essence, empty and free from elaborations. And within that empty nature, they are actually the wisdom of great bliss, the very wisdom of the Buddha. Just as the body is inseparable from the Buddha's kaya, in the mindfulness of feeling, we realize that our feelings are also inseparable from the Buddha's wisdom. This wisdom of great bliss is pure. It doesn't have a single trace of worldly suffering or defilement. That is what we call mindfulness of feeling. Gathering the elaborations of mind and mental events without exclusion into the clear light innate space of the mind is the close placement of mindfulness upon the mind. In other schools, mindfulness of the mind usually just means seeing the mind as empty or training the mind to let go of any attachment. But here, all the elaborations of the mind and mental events are all gathered into the clear light innate space of the mind. The nature of the mind is the primordial space. It's actually the Guhyagarbha, the Buddha nature. The very nature of the mind is the creative display of our Buddha nature. So our mindfulness of the mind is very different from the Hinayana. For them, or in general Sutrayana, it's enough to say that everything, the mind, mental factors, and the alaya, is empty. Once they reach emptiness, they stop there. They don't really explain the clear light aspect. Without acceptance or rejection, the designation of all phenomena of samsara and enlightenment as purity and evenness is the close placement of mindfulness upon phenomena. Without any accepting or rejecting, everything is seen as pure and equal. Every single thing, all phenomena within samsara and nirvana are experienced as equal and pure, with nothing to grasp or cast aside. That is what mindfulness of phenomena means to us. This is as taught in the Tantra sacred magical manifestation matrix. Moreover, the way the great vehicle's close placements of mindfulness surpass those of the lesser vehicle is stated in distinguishing the middle and extremes. The way bodhisattvas consider, take to mind, and achieve is itself sublime. The first difference between the Mahayana and the Hinayana is their object of focus. The Mahayana has a much broader scope, as it covers the bodies of both oneself and all other beings. Then there is the difference in mental approach. As I mentioned, the Hinayana simply meditates on the body as something impure, whereas the Mahayana views it as emptiness. Finally, the result is different. The Hinayana leads to the state of an arhat, while the Mahayana leads to full Buddhahood. These are their distinct features. These are the differences between the Hinayana and the Mahayana. I studied distinguishing the middle and extremes a long time ago, so I think that's the gist of it. I might not recall every single detail. Thus, mantra is more sublime than sutra in a similar way. In short, to consider the phenomena of samsara and enlightenment, including the bodies of oneself and others, this is the difference in the object of focus within the Vajrayana. The Sutrayana doesn't really include all phenomena of samsara and nirvana in this practice, but here the scope is incredibly vast. It takes all phenomena, everything in samsara and nirvana, centered around one's own body, as the object of focus. Consider the phenomena of samsara and enlightenment to be inseparable from great primordial purity and evenness. This is how the Vajrayana approaches it. No matter which of the four mindfulnesses we are talking about, they are all seen as the union of primordial purity and emptiness, where the two are inseparable. Finally, regarding the result, to take that to mind, ensure that the ultimate result will be achieved without the need to rely upon another path. This is the approach of mantra. In the Sutrayana, one eventually has to enter the secret mantra path and pass through various other stages to reach completion. But with this practice, you don't need to go through all those extra steps. You can reach the ultimate goal directly. This is the unique excellence of the secret mantra and what truly sets it apart from the Sutrayana. According to the relative aspect on the path of sutra, samsara is abandoned and nirvana is accepted. In terms of the ultimate truth, there might not be much difference in their conduct, but on the relative level, the Sutrayana emphasizes a clear distinction. They see samsara as something to be abandoned and nirvana as something to be attained. They draw a big distinction on the relative level. Whether it's Madhyamaka or Chittamatra, any Sutrayana school, they say that on a relative level, afflictions must be discarded and wisdom must be embraced. They see a world of difference between afflictions and bodhi within the realm of relative reality. But here, the path is entered by inseparably uniting samsara and enlightenment. In the secret mantra, samsara and nirvana are inseparable right here and now. It's simply a matter of whether you recognize this nature. There's no need to split reality into two truths. Right when a thought arises, you look directly at its essence. If you recognize it for what it is, that very thought is bodhi. It is awakening. There's no need to pick and choose between relative and ultimate. The secret mantra directly practices this principle of non-rejection. The Sutrayana goes through a long analytical process only to conclude that everything is empty in the ultimate sense and dreamlike in the relative sense. By defining it that way, they never truly touch upon the aspect of primordial purity. Some might not admit there's a difference between the Sutrayana and Vajrayana. Indeed, many people who haven't studied deeply refuse to acknowledge that the Vajrayana has these unique qualities, but whether they admit it or not is another matter. In reality, one can definitely point out these differences between the two. And honestly, it's very convenient to discuss such profound truths here in the Larangar. All right, let's stop here for today. I was going to cover a bit more, but it looks like you're getting a bit tired. I'm still feeling fine, though.
Bandangara Badma Sodargye Bandangara Badma Sodargye Bandangara Badma Sodargye